Last week, the Board of Education unanimously passed a comprehensive maintenance plans for its schools and facilities. There are currently $50.7 million worth of deferred priorities. In other words, routine maintenance and replacement of building components, infrastructure, and architectural finishes. Colin, how does this affect our school kids?
Well, honestly, I think Washington County Public Schools is probably in a little bit better shape than our national infrastructure. So I have a fair amount of experience just seeing the schools in person, as well as some back-end stuff, and I don't think that $50 million translates into some woeful lack of maintenance in the schools. I think for the most part, they're fairly well maintained, and that's always the case with a system as large as the Washington County Public Schools. Is you're going to have maintenance backlogs. There are things that are not going to be done. It's just the way the budgets work.
Ashley, from a city perspective, is it not true that some of our city schools are our older schools, in some cases, and some of them are newer, and might they be more affected by this backlog than others?
I think we're more affected by new construction and the rush jobs that we place on new construction projects. If you actually pay attention to the work orders that are being produced, they're not in the older buildings. Like the proliferation of the work orders are in the newer facilities that were rushed to completion, like Pangbourne Elementary, that are now costing us a ton of money because we went with the cheapest route. We went for a popular vote in determining whether or not that project should go underway, and now we're paying the price. I'm all for the actual reuse of facilities and not proliferation of gray space, and now it's biting us in the butt with our school system that we'd rather rush to produce these brand new flashy facilities at the risk of quality and longevity.
Okay. Ken, what say you?
Well, all right, so it's building components, infrastructure, and architectural finishes is what the deferred funding is for. So do you have any repairs around your home that you just haven't gotten around to, or not necessarily even have the funding for? For example, it could be anything from, I've got a door stopper that's not attached to the wall anymore.
It could be, but it's $50 million worth of door
Really
stoppers.
big door stopper.
It's a lot of door
Absolutely.
stoppers.
But how big is the actual value of Washington County Public Schools? We're talking millions upon millions upon millions, so it's, when you look at the amount of funding here, that's pretty small probably compared to the total value of everything.
But what's the total budget of the board every year? Do you know, Ashley, is it?
I have no idea. I worked for the city, not for the county.
That's a good point. The point is that that they have a big budget.
Right.
So, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that this is not a pretty significant portion of their budget.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to kind of agree with Ken in that I think it's a small percentage of the total. And in all honesty, going around and seeing the schools, excuse me, I'm not seeing any woeful lacks of maintenance that that affect the buildings or affect the quality of education, or really ultimately the point of the schools is to educate children. So if we're talking about architectural spending and things of that nature, those are somewhat more cosmetic.
That's very true, but this is in my mind, this is going to be a pretty big nut to catch up on over time with that type of balance. So.
Well, absolutely, but keep in mind also. So, for example, Winter Street School. So there's $2.6 million that can be removed out of that total because Winter Street School is closing.
Mm-hmm.
So as the older buildings are replaced with newer buildings, some of that can go away.
But to Ashley's point, Ashley, is Winter Street replacement a good idea in your mind?
No, I think that Winter Street actually has a unique heritage in being one of the few schools that are predominantly walk-in, meaning they don't cause stress on the busing infrastructure. Now we're talking about completely changing up all the districts and rerouting kids that used to be able to walk 2 blocks to go to school to having to travel by bus over an hour to get to their facilities. It's so easy to think that, okay, this old building doesn't work, let's just build a new one. But nobody really thinks about what happens to that old building after it's completely vacant, what kind of impact it has on the community, especially a high-risk community like Winter Street, where there is enough, what do you call it, ancillary foot traffic, let's just say, and other things that influence our youth, that by having that space vacant and having that basically that entire block completely vacant, losing the relationship that the school had with Girls Inc., losing the relationship that the school had with the Master Gardeners, losing the relationship that that school had with the church, which is catty corner to it. I mean, we just don't think about that. We just want a flashy new space to feel good about what our taxes are going to. I don't agree with that at all.
So it would actually be my hope that now that we have another West End school going in, that with Winter Street School closing, that building could actually, either be completely tore down or actually take the time to remodel it right and then reopen it for the kids in that area.
So who would be doing that?
Have to be the county. It
Okay.
would have to be
So
Washington
who's
County
going to
Public Schools.
complain about the fact that we're going to spend a couple $100,000 on lead mitigation and a proper deconstruction of a lead-ridden facility? Who's going to complain about that?
And not to mention asbestos probably. And
Yeah, so
and
let's
other-
talk about
yeah.
how much it would cost to mitigate those issues versus acquisition of land and the building of a brand new space.
Would you want your kids going to a school knowing that it's got asbestos and lead all throughout it?
I would want my kids going to a school that actually made sense for them to go to. And I understand that it's not just a matter of whether or not I want my kids to go to that facility. It's what actually makes sense for the dollars that I'm putting in through my taxes. And when it comes to spending, I think the actual estimate was somewhere around $520,000 to abate all of those problems in Winter Street School and talk about a secondary facility that has a much smaller footprint than the facility that people are talking about versus demolishing that building and building a brand new space. We're talking about a difference of several $1 million here, folks.
Oh, probably more
I
than
mean,
that.
let's just talk about our McMansions and see how this Elementary School fits into the equation. This is all stupid to me. This is all just fodder for taxpayers to feel good about their taxes. Nobody wants to renovate a space. Everyone just wants something bright and shiny and new, and that's just stupid mentality.
Old is bad, new is good, right?
That's the dumbest stuff ever, and it has absolutely nothing. Like, let's consider community sustainability. I mean,
But-
and the financial impact of having that empty gray space in our West End that really cannot afford to have any more empty gray space. All we're doing is propagating the disintegration of that community. So I don't agree with this new facility at all, in case you couldn't tell.
I would have never
I guess
guessed,
the question
Ashley.
that I would ask is, and I'm sure that the Board of Education went through a process where they looked at whether it would be viable to reconstruct the school, and there may very well be structural and other issues that do not make it viable to be renovated. So we don't know that. We're kind of making a guess. And I think it's jumping to a conclusion that anybody would want to just build a new space just to build a new space.
No, what it comes down to is a popular vote. It's the will of the people. That's what people want.
And by
people want a
The
new
will of the
facility.
people, the will of the
The
people
same thing
includes
with-
You're
the
saying
people in the
about the
Winter
community,
Street
or you're
The
talking
neighborhood.
about the board
community, how
members?
did we make the decision for Pangbourne Elementary? That was put to a public forum. That was the majority of the decision-making process. It caused us to, basically demolish a historic space and completely ruin any positive foot traffic that existed in that little cul-de-sac that we call the exterior of Pangbourne Park, by the way.
Right.
The exact same thing happened with Bester Elementary. So now we have a very, very expensive demolition project on our hands that nobody wants to foot the bill for, and no determinate plans for that space, which is right on the front and center of one of our main thoroughfares. It's going to be empty space.
The ultimate question
But
is what's best for the
hidden
kids.
from view and far away from everybody's eyesight and well beyond what taxpayers are probably willing to spend is this beautiful brand new facility that had nothing but problems in its first 6 months.
And Ashley's
by
going to get the last word on that. Next up on the flip side, speaking of Ashley, she will lead a discussion about a new inspection fee that the City of Hagerstown landlords will now have to pay. Please stay tuned. We're back in 3.